All right, we are live. Griz
Large and in
Nation.
charge.
Exactly. I don't know where that came from.
I was just thinking. Man. I don't know.
Oh,
Came from the heart. I don't know.
exactly. Well, we come here. Hopefully, you are having a little bit warmer day than we are.
Yeah,
Man,
what's your low over there right now?
it is. I think it's like 9 degrees, but with
90
wind
degrees?
chill, it's like -2.
That's t-shirt weather, brother.
Exactly right.
Goodness
Exactly.
gracious. Yeah, no, it's not that cold over here. What is it, like 30 or something like that? Maybe in the 20s in the morning, kind of depending. Let
Oh
me just
man.
double check. I can't even
Well,
remember.
uh,
25, so
yeah, that's that's
respectable.
that's hot, man. That's a heat wave.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, dude. I'm telling you. Yeah, what were you saying? You said you got a foot of snow or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's like 12 inches so far. I think we're supposed to get up to 16, possibly 18 inches of
Really?
snow.
By the morning?
Um, it's a winter weather advisory from I think winds or Tuesday till Thursday
Mm-hmm.
night. So we're 12 inches, 13 inches right
Dude,
around
it's
there right
crazy.
now.
Like in the Washington schools or something like that, they get a little bit of rain or like they get a little bit of snow. They're like, cancel the whole week.
Oh
Like,
no, we go, man.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But it's all good. It's all good in the
it's all
hood.
good. Makes them stronger, right?
It is. It
We
is.
had
It
reset.
does.
We had recess today too. We're like, no, we're going outside. Let's go.
No, I was telling Adam earlier, I was just like, I bet you get excited when you have an early day because he said he had an early day. He was like, hell yeah, motherfucker. And I was like, okay. Adam doesn't talk like that, but you know what I'm trying to get across.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Well, hey man, and listeners, we're just gonna do a little season recap of the season that was, and kind of talk about what we saw, what happened, and then kind of go into that, see where it leads us. There are some fan questions, so we'll go over some listener fan questions as well,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, let's get to it, man.
Yeah. I mean, let's
But
start off with the Grizz updates. You got Grizz update this time?
exactly. Grizz updates. I need to do like a song, man. I need to get somebody, not me, because I have no artistic ability or anything
No
like that.
musical talent.
No musical
That's,
talents at
oh
all.
gosh.
But yeah, let's get into some Grizz updates. Let's talk about some men's basketball. They have been on a roll.
Yep.
They've played, the last two games. The Dakota schools, South Dakota State at home, they obliterated the Jackrabbits 81-56. I think they finally got people healthy. They were going through a slump where people just couldn't get on the court. Finally got everybody healthy there. Traveled to Fargo and beat NDSU 82-75.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great game too. They had, oh man, NDSU had the 6'11" guy that was just a beast, man.
Yeah, just a monster.
And
I saw that dude.
oh
I'll photo
man.
that guy, yeah.
So, but yeah, two good wins. That adds to our total with the Summit League. We've played 3 Summit teams. We're 3-0 against them. We have a game coming up this Saturday against Prairie View A&M down in Houston, Texas. And then we go to Spokane, Washington and play the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
That's a tough travel schedule right there.
Exactly, right? Right
North
before,
Dakota, Texas, and then Washington. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, and I think they've got finals this week, right? So hopefully they get their finals done. They can focus on some basketball. At least we don't have to do any schooling during that time. But yeah, that's a travel schedule.
No, 100%, 100%. Yeah, man. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. I don't know if they'll show the Gonzaga game just because with their rights and stuff with the games. But definitely just go check out if you want to watch it.
Yeah, they're not going to be on ESPN Plus, are they?
No, but it's really weird because on here it says the NDSU game wasn't on ESPN Plus, but it was. So, just go check no matter what, because sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. The NDSU game says here that they weren't supposed to, but they were.
Yeah.
But yeah, going on to some women's basketball, man. They have had they've had a brutal schedule. They have played some really, really good teams. They're definitely challenging themselves in the non-conference. They had a heartbreaker versus Grand Canyon in Missoula where they were going back and forth. They traveled to Vermilion, South Dakota to play South Dakota. They were down early in that game, but came back. That second quarter that they scored 30 points in the second quarter.
Jeez.
And really put it to South Dakota. They won 76-60. They play this Sunday against Montana Tech in Missoula, so go check it out. And then they also play Gonzaga on the Wednesday. So the men play them Tuesday, the women play them Wednesday.
Man, so we got some good games down the stretch.
Exactly. And the women's Gonzaga team is usually really good too as well.
We're in conference, right?
Conference play. Yep. So that is up. That's all for Griz updates. You know,
I mean, goodness gracious, things are flying by already, dog.
It is.
Almost already in conference. I feel bad. We still haven't covered them yet.
I know, right? Well, we will get to that. We got some time now that we can kind of, after the Christmas holiday season, we can kind of dedicate some time and go over Griz basketball.
What are you doing for Christmas?
Staying here. So my parents, we go off and on with in-laws and my parents, and so my parents get Christmas this year, and so my parents actually moved down here to Sheridan, so I don't have to go anywhere. I just have to go to their house.
Oh, tell me how nice that is, though.
It is super
nice. Let me ask you this. Are you guys gonna have tamales?
Tamales?
Yeah. Tamales? Yeah, no, tamales.
No. Is that the food that you guys?
That's the Christmas special, man. That's what brings the people together, man.
I can't say it like you, but I have had some really good tamales.
Really?
Yeah. When I taught in Rock Springs, there were some really good,
Dude, you know my favorite things in the world are those little corn or little drivable taco trucks that are parked on random streets at like 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. Oh, my goodness gracious. There's one guy in the back. He doesn't speak a lick of English. The whole time. He's just, hey, what do you want? But in Spanish, those are the best type of tacos.
Oh, man.
Let me tell you.
Oh.
I'm sorry,
are you getting going back to California for Christmas, or
No. I will be here with my brother, and we'll just spend it. I actually just spent a good part of today trying to wrap up a lot of the stuff. And let me tell you, I don't know how to wrap to save life. You put a gun to my head, say, hey, wrap this up, or they're gonna get it. Might as well say goodbyes. Type of thing. You know what I mean? I'm not just so I've been watching YouTube videos on how to do it, but I will this week. I am going to be going to Seattle to go to my first ever professional football game.
Wow, nice.
The Seahawks and the 49ers, man. Hell yeah, brother.
Oh, you're a 49ers fan, though.
What do you got to say? What do you have to say?
I have nothing to say because I don't really watch pro football.
Really?
I used to follow, and I'm going to get slack for this.
You look like a Cowboys fan.
When I was a kid, I was a Cowboy fan.
Yeah, so you look like the type.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. I cheer for the Packers. My wife is a huge Packers fan.
Cheeseheads.
Oh yeah. So she's in love with Aaron Rodgers.
Only because Samore is on that team, I respect it.
Exactly.
I won't speak bad on them.
Exactly. We're gonna cheer.
But to be honest, I've always liked them.
Yeah. They're just like that niche team that you can't get mad at that never really wins.
In my older age, I'm starting to get convinced that I don't know how good Aaron Rodgers is for the team. Before I used to be on his side to be like, everybody's just making a name for him, this and that. But who knows?
Yeah. He's kind of been sucking it up lately, though.
Yeah. Well, you know what he started doing this year too? He started doing like psychedelics. Did you read about that?
No.
Yeah. He started doing like I don't know what kind of psychedelics it was specifically, but I think it was like along the lines of like ayahuasca, the toad stuff. So the really, really kind of spiritual stuff. And so apparently he's like a new person, but who knows?
Weird.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I wonder if that helps him at all.
I don't know. You would think, you kind of start to debate as, we start to progress in the sports world. I think a lot of things that used to be taboo are starting to get a little bit more normalized, and then vice versa too. Obviously, you can't be taking all the steroids in the world like you used to be able to do back in the day because there was no regulations. But I wonder if psychedelics and those sort of things, depending on how you view it, will, start to kind of make its way into, the professional areas of sports. I mean, because they legalized, they're no longer like fining NFL players for marijuana, are they?
I think They are. I think so.
I think they are. Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think it's a national thing. I think it's just by state.
So they're doing it depending on the. Okay, that makes sense. And
I
I thought it
think
was like for NFL players, like you get caught with it. It's not necessarily like, hey, you get a slap on the wrist, but you won't be in major trouble like you used to be. You know?
Yeah, I think the NFL, and I have no clue, but I think the NFL has their stance on it. And it kind of doesn't go because each state is different, right? And so I don't know how they would do that if they had just like, oh, just depending on your state. But I think they have a no policy on it.
What about? I mean, what do you think the role of like psychedelics would play in the sports world? You think that'd ever be a thing?
I don't know. I think that maybe I know they probably have some type of a release for muscles and stuff like that. I don't know too much about the psychedelics and all that stuff. I have no clue. So I don't know. I have no clue.
I think it'd be good for coaches.
Really?
Hell yeah, brother.
Release, kind of just calm down.
Well, you know what? I heard it's like a real spiritual thing. You know, I heard that you learn a lot about yourself, and I think a lot of people misinterpret it and kind of it falls into the line of like marijuana and drinking. You know what I mean? Like when you're drinking and taking shots after shots, you obviously end up becoming a different person because you're messed up. You know, I think along the lines of marijuana too. You know, a lot of people are able to cope with it and handle it. You know, but I think on the other end of the spectrum, some people don't know how to handle it. Some people get more anxiety. Some people, get mixed reviews, even though I do, think that it's decent depending on the circumstance that you can use it for like muscle recovery and muscle kind of relaxation, those sort of things. But I'm wondering where that role of psychedelics play into, if it ever will play a role.
Because I have no clue.
I've heard a lot of like, I don't even know how to say it, like a lot of value as far as medicine goes. It's provided through potential psychedelics and that people use it for like mental health problems. And so because of that, I'm curious to see if like, any of that type of stuff will ever be introduced. And it'll probably be way after our time. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
like once we have even deeper understanding and sense of ourselves, but you never know.
Yeah, it would be kind of scary to do right now just because I don't think I don't know, maybe there are people out there that know more about it. It would be have to be controlled.
Yeah, you just think of the mental health potential benefit that those things might provide, and obviously we're in an arena where that we struggle with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so because of that, I'm wondering if there ever be like will be a correlation as far as, hey, we know how to help you. It'll just be in a little bit of a different way.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this psychedelic season that we had here.
Yeah. I mean, it was a trip.
It was a trip.
Let's get into it, man. Let's get into
it. Oh, man. Well, let's kind of go in like from the start, kind of like a story, right? Go from the start of it to the end of it.
The highs and lows. Let's do it.
The highs and the lows. So preseason, we were ranked first, right? We were ranked first, and it wasn't.
Yep.
It wasn't really like a huge unanimous. It was very, very close. The top three teams with Montana State, and Sac State were a couple points away, right? So it wasn't like a huge thing. But we finished 6th this year. So what I did is I kind of tried to my best. These weren't like, I didn't do a huge dive into it, but a little bit, right? So the last 4 or 5 years, what we were preseasoned at and then what we finished at, right? So 2018, we were preseasoned at 4. We finished 6th. 19, we were picked 4th. We finished 4th. Then the COVID year happened. That didn't happen. 21, we were picked 2nd. We finished 4th. And then this year we were picked 1st and we finished 6th. Now, just to let you guys know that I'm not ragging on anyone. It's just it's a good perspective of where we're preseasoned at, where we're finishing. There's a whole lot that goes into that with injuries, your schedule, what's happening inside your program. But honestly, like if you look at that, Griz Nation is held to a different standard, right?
Yeah.
And everyone knows that. Players, coaches, fans, it doesn't seem like we are meeting those standards and meeting those expectations. And that would, can't imagine what the players feel, because it has to suck, not
Mhm.
meeting what you want to accomplish.
Mhm.
But going into that just kind of shows, hey, well, this is where we're at. This is where we want to be. And we'll go into it. What are some things that are, because if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, we haven't finished over 4th place. So are there things that are happening in in the program, or things that are happening to us that we can kind of look to that say, hey, we need to fix this, and maybe that will get us to a different point?
Mhm. No, yeah, I mean, it really is good perspective, and when you see a common trend of not being able to break into the 3 2s and 1s, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, every single year or these past couple of years, I feel like we've always been there. We've had the talent. We're on the
Yep.
cusp. It's just for one reason or another, whether it be a bad game, injuries kind of being the downfall of us, the play calling being an issue. You know what I mean? Just it's always something. And it's just one of those things where you're sitting here banging your head against the wall trying to figure out what we can possibly do, you
Yeah.
know. And it has to start from the top. It
Yep.
really, really does. And Bobby knows that, it's between him. I think I saw, after the game, he did, a press conference on Monday, and they asked him about the potential maybe changes that might be coming. And he was like, that's between me and those guys. You have no say in that. And I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
It really is between him and those guys, but it starts with him. It starts with him when he walks into the restroom and he looks himself in the mirror and he says, okay, what do I need to do, in order to kind of put these kids in a winning position? Because he's a good coach. He's a really, really good coach, but he's just trying to figure out how to get to the upper echelon in today's football world, because 2008 is very different than 2020. When he come in 2017 or 2018?
2018.
Yeah, 2018. 10 years.
10 years.
10 years of changes within the game and the game book. Different types of athletes. Athletes today would run over the guys of the past simply because we understand nutrition better. We understand the training better. We know the things to kind of correct. I feel like in the coaching sense, you need to continue to be able to kind of change it up as well.
Yeah. Well, and just kind of think of that. Like, I totally agree that that's not going to be voiced. The coaching staff isn't going to be voiced. That's not going to be something that they're going to.
Yeah, to be expected. Yeah,
Yeah.
expect that.
But that's a question that has to be asked, I feel, because there was, through this year, and we'll get into them, there were some coaching errors throughout the whole year where you scratch your head and say, what are we doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, not that we're going to say, hey, this person needs to be fired, but there does need to be he does need to make sure that, hey, these things are being looked at. And who knows? I'm sure he's a smart guy. I don't know him personally. He has to be smart where
he's very, very smart.
Yeah. And I think he knows the problems. I hope he does. I hope it's not glossed over and kind of, hey, we were 1 play, 2 plays away, because there's some glaring things, I think, that are holding us back. And I think we'll get into those. But going into the season, Angel, let me know if you agree with these or if I'm missing one. Going into the season, these were the kind of the questions that we thought, hey, we really don't know where we're at with this, right? So going into the year, we were kind of wondering who's going to step up for quarterback, right? That was the one question. We thought, hey, Lucas Johnson's coming in. Who do we have behind him? Does Chris Brown make that step? That was a question that we had. We had a question at O-line. Hey, we don't have a left tackle. How are the guys going to mesh? How's that right side going to go? Are they going to have, that development where they take that step? Who's going to step up in the running back crew and the wide receiver crew? Are they going to use Malik in a different way so he can get his touches? How is Marcus Knight going to look? We kind of had those questions as well. The offensive play calling, we thought, hey, well, it's kind of lacked in some areas. Sometimes we kind of get away from doing and getting the ball to some of the skill players. How's that going to look? And then the last one that I had here is, we thought that, hey, we're going to go into this season and we're going to go 5-0 and we're going to go into that Sac State showdown, right? Right, top 5 showdown, and that just didn't happen. Those were our things that, hey, how are we going to adjust to that playing at Sac State and that first game? Those were the questions. Were there any questions that you thought we had at the beginning of the year?
You know what? I think it even stems just a little bit early from that, even when that whole 37 debacle.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
No,
I think
that's what I thought. We'll get into that. Yeah, I have that.
Yeah,
Our next one thing.
just just starting off the year on a little bit of an awkward kind of foot. It's just one of those things that throws the mojo off. You know what I mean? I mean, you prepare, and then to get the media attention of who's going to get this 37 when honestly, whoever did get it, we would have moved on with our lives type of thing.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But at the same time, it was like, why was this an issue in the first place? What's going on behind the scenes, if there was anything going on. You know what I mean? And so I think along with all of the other questions you kind of mentioned, I mean, you're just spot on. I think I think everybody had the overall consensus that, hey, there's no reason for us to not be 5-0 before we head over to Sac State. How are the offensive line going to be able to, play? They're going to win the first 5 games, but how are they going to mesh against a really kind of superior defensive front? Quarterback position. Obviously, we were really hopeful because Johnson came in with 6-7 years of experience, played at the FBS level, won a couple of games in some really kind of cool fashions. But ultimately, man, I think it was like a tale of two halves. You know what I mean? 2 seasons. You started off with a lot of promise, and we saw some really, really great things. We saw some things that were kind of like troublesome. But as the year progressed, do we really start to put it down on the players? Do we look at the coaches? How do we kind of assess that and kind of go? Because ultimately, obviously, there's still a ton of work to be done. And it's still, when you're at the bottom of the board, it's pretty, you have to be a decent team to go up to the middle of the pack. But going from the middle of the pack to the top echelon, that's a pretty hard thing to do. And it's all a game of inches. But what kind of things are we going to change in this offseason in order to put us there, And that's the real question.
Yeah. Well, and let's get into that 37 controversy, because going into the season, those were our questions. Then we had this 37 controversy, right? It looks like Jace Lewis hands it down to Marcus Well now. And then, you hear things, right? You hear things of, oh, hey, it wasn't, told to the coaching staff. The coaching staff has to weigh in or anything. So there was rumors going on around, right? I think feelings got hurt. That wasn't answered. That happened in July, right? It was posted in July by Jace that he was giving it to Marcus. Yep. They had their picture on Griz on July 27th. It didn't get answered for a month. And a program that doesn't, and I'm going to get some heat from this, a program that doesn't like publicity that they can't control handled this very, very poorly. Like this controversy that shouldn't have been a controversy, it was able to be handled so that it couldn't be a controversy. And I think it may have split the
room around a little bit.
What's that?
You think it split the room a little bit?
I think it might have. I know for a fact that it has with other past players. I know for a fact past players are pissed that this has happened, and I know that it could have been just, if they want to change how they do the 37, that's fine, but have those conversations with the players. Like, this is the number 37 is not and has not been ran, and you let me know if I'm wrong, it hasn't been run by the coaches. This is
that's what I was kind of wondering, because
a player thing.
In my experience, I mean, unless I did not know, because obviously I'm not a part of that, so because of that, I don't necessarily know. I know there's a guy with a number. At the end of the year, he gets to decide. I had no recollection or idea that if the coaches actually had a say in it. I didn't think that had been the past. You know what I mean? And so because of that, I thought it was whatever way he decides to go do it, he does it. And I think that if he does decide to consult with people and ask for people's opinions, that's because he just simply wants to ask.
Yeah.
He's just curious to be like, who do you think I should give it to? Not because he's obligated to go to his teammates and be like, well, what do you guys think? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, and I've interviewed past 37s. If you haven't, check out like the early editions of this podcast. I've interviewed some of the 37s,
The baby
and
days, the young days.
exactly. They go into how they kind of came about. It was, and it wasn't always, hey, I'm gonna do a media thing or anything like that. A couple of them were like, hey, we were, out camping. Told them, hey, I want to give you a 37. What do you think? And so I think that I think if you lose a lot of luster with that number, if it starts being a coach thing,
Yeah, I
and that
think
and
it
that's
has to be player driven.
exactly,
That's one thing.
exactly.
Obviously, we're so micromanaged in that world, which is fine. You're trying to get these guys on a schedule. And a lot of guys need that type of micromanagement, but that's something that's special because of the players. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yep.
And so because of that, the fact that they have the voice and have that power to be like, I want this guy to have it because I feel like he emulates what it means to be from this state and
Yeah.
represent. You know what I
Yep.
mean? As soon
Yep.
as you take that away from the players, like you said, I just think it starts to lose meaning. So, but again, I was never aware of any meetings that happened,
Yeah.
between anybody. I
Yeah.
thought it was just a, hey, I like you. I think you represent it well, and I've never had a 37 where I disagreed with them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? All the
Yeah.
37s that I've been a part of, I said 100% that guy deserves it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just seems you don't want to like you look at the great teams, right? NDSU, are they having these types of controversies in their program, right? That last for months on end. Probably, I haven't heard of it, and I think that if we did hear about it, it would get out, right? So it's just going back to that championship, like
But I
how
also, on the other end, like in order, like in favor of just the program in general, I
yeah.
do think that the fans that we have are a lot more passionate, a
Oh
lot
yeah.
more, kind of opinionated,
Yep.
than any other football team out there.
Yeah.
And so, because of that, it could be the smallest thing, but we blow it up to be this huge, huge ordeal. So,
Yeah.
because of that, I also see that side too. That, hey, you know what? Maybe it was something that they were trying to do behind closed doors, but somebody got a whiff of it. They ran with it in the community. But at the end of the day, ultimately, like you said, I don't think it started off the year or the preseason just on a little bit of a funky way. Like you said,
Well, yeah.
some people that are divided, divided rooms. Obviously, people have kind of seen probably Jace's tweet after the
Mm-hmm.
season too.
Yep.
Just it sounded like there was a little bit of that tension there between anybody, but I hope they had some time to kind of sit down and talk about it, man, because the fact that bad juju was kind of there until even after the season, it seems like there were some issues there. So I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully they get that time to kind of work it out. So
Yeah, because there's just no time for that type of stuff. You know
no.
what I mean? There's no time for that, especially in a program at the stages that we're at. Again, we have a long way to go, but we've seen flashes that make us believe time and time again that, hey, you know what? We're on the cusp. We're on the cusp.
Yeah.
But I think it really kind of boils down to a lot of those small little things that are going to make those substantial leaps.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, going into the season, man, we started, like we said, it started 5-0. But during those times, man, and I know went back and kind of listened to some of our podcasts. We had some questions on the O line. We had some
Yeah. How do you
questions on
think they
the.
fared out? Beginning of the year to the end of the year.
I think that there was some development there. I
Yeah.
think at the beginning of the year we weren't getting the push. The play calling getting the ball was still kind of a thing that in those first games we were like, okay, so how is this offense going to look? I really don't think we really had an identity as an offense.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of saw the special teams play, which is crazy weird, right? At the beginning of the year, these special teams errors that usually you don't see in a Montana-led team. And then the Idaho game, right? Idaho game was crazy. I know. Didn't you go to that game?
No, I don't think I
No.
went to that game. No,
Okay.
wait. No, I don't think I was there. Never mind.
Okay.
I watched it from my work.
Okay, so we lost that game. We were unable to run the ball. We turned it over a lot. Kind of beat ourselves at that point, right? And it really showed, some of the things that we kind of knew. They knew that they could hit us over the middle. You kind of saw Giovanni McCoy kind of run on us a little bit and get out of the pocket. So we started seeing those things as well. And so, we did see some things start chugging in the right direction, and then you get hit, right? Mm-hmm. And like that boxing mentality, right? You don't know how good you are until you first get hit, and you got to respond, right? And so we tried to respond, right? We tried to respond. We went to Sac State. I think we were playing really well, and Lucas gets hurt, gets knocked out of the game, and from there, Chris comes in. I think he does a pretty good job of kind of righting the ship, and we lose a heartbreaker in overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when our season, and we both said it on here, this is going to make or break our season right here. If we can get some of these wins under control, because that was the hard part of our year. Idaho, Sac State, Weber State were those 3 games. We didn't know how good Idaho was going to be. Mm-hmm. But we couldn't, and this is the whole thing that I think where the Sac State game kind of started that slide, right? We started getting some injuries. The officiating calls were horrible, but as a championship aspiration team, you can't just say, "Hey, that's a bad call. We want the call," right? You can't leave it up to that point. You have to make sure that you rise above that, and you have the next man up mentality. And I think we had some of that, but we couldn't get enough above that to win those games.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%, man. I actually think, kind of looking back at it, because we played 4 games and then we went to Idaho State. Mm-hmm. And I remember, before that, it was kind of a, really kind of pushover teams, but for whatever reason, it was supposed to be the same type of outcome. We should have steamrolled this team. But I think that's when we really kind of first saw some of those questions being answered of, hey, what's going on with this team? You know what I mean? Hey, is it the offensive line? Is it the quarterback? Is it play calling? Is it just getting an identity or a little bit of a rhythm? Like, what's kind of going on? That's when those kind of questions started to formulate. And then from there, we saw some really uncharacteristics from the team, which made us question even more what's going on. And that's why we started paying a little bit more closer attention to, hey, is the line a little bit too young on the right? A guy that used to be a defensive starter for Nebraska or a player for Nebraska, taking on an offensive role, is it the offensive line type of question? Yeah. And I think as the year kind of progressed, I saw too many good things for me to be really, truly concerned that, hey, you know what? Yeah, don't get me wrong. Just like any other year, there's things that can be better on the offensive front. We have a young kind of line. We're putting everybody except Walker, because Walker was a transfer. And so we got 2 young guys on the right. We have 2, kind of guys with experience in the middle, in that center and left guard position, and then they're going to be taking the next year. So I do think that I saw some flashes that were really kind of impressive to me. But ultimately, I think this was a huge step. I think from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, I did see a stride. I saw that next kind of level of what we could potentially be, even as far as, and I think that first game that really solidified some of those changes and that kind of buying into that whole demeanor and that whole Dola attitude was the Sac State game. That game was so much fun to watch against a really talented team. Obviously, they made a run until playoffs too. They just lost this past weekend, which was a great. Did you watch?
Did you watch that game?
Dude, I watched like half of it, and then I had to go do some work stuff, and then I came back to it. So I kind of was watching the highlights.
Oh my Lord!
Crazy. Did you watch it though?
I watched probably from like halftime till the end, and I was like, man, I don't want this game to stop. Because it was just like back and forth.
They're just in there. Oh
my gosh!
Come back. You're like, that's it. It's over. They're not coming back off that, and then they come back. Huh?
Yeah. I was like, it was a great game to watch. I can't imagine being a Cardinal. I think they're called the Cardinals, right? Incarnate Words are called Cardinals, right? Yeah, and then the Sac State, like their fan bases, how nervous they probably were watching that game, but it was amazing. There was absolutely no defense at all.
In the FCS playoff game or something like that, like something ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The most points, the most yards, but there's no defense.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think kind of going back to the offensive line, I think that game really kind of solidified that, hey, we could have a really good offensive
Yeah.
line. I just think that experience needs to continue to go up in order for us to be at that level of play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not to say
Well,
that it's not attainable. I think it's just this year was super good for us, and I'm excited to see what they do next year at that specific position. You know?
yeah. Well, and I think going back into like the Weber State game, I think that game was kind of just a weird kind of thing because I think we're still dealing with Lucas kind of being hurt and kind of like what direction we go into, and then you know have those next two kind of easy games where we beat the next two opponents 120-7, which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of start feeling better. You start, okay, we got Lucas back. We're hitting on all cylinders, and we go into the neighbor game and totally get shellacked, right? Shellacked is the word that I
goodness.
shellacked.
I saw somebody on Twitter be like, "Yeah, shellacked."
Yeah,
like,
yep.
I was like, "Oh goodness."
Oh, and if you haven't seen that one episode, I actually even afterwards he didn't believe me. Angel didn't believe me it was a word, so I looked up the definition and sent it to him.
Apparently it is, but apparently.
But
yeah, like even the quarterback controversy, as far as just the injuries that he was kind of dealing with, you know, the questioning as a fan, is he going to be here this week? Is he not? Even to that last playoff game, I mean, he looked like he was a little bit twisted.
Man, dude,
looked like he was on his last leg. But so that's why I applaud him. I mean, he literally gave it all that he possibly could. To be out there for those players, for the coaches, for the fans. So I have nothing bad to say about that guy. Because he gave it absolutely everything he could. When he was out there and he was on, that dude was on. But that's the thing. It just came too many opportunities where we weren't able to kind of get it. He had a couple, weird games that he knew himself that it wasn't to his standard. He came back, had some really great games, but it just wasn't enough in the end, And again, for a guy like Chris to come in and try to finish out those games, that's a hard thing to do, even for a starter, against really, really talented teams. But I mean, it just goes to show, man, that, we thought we had it all figured out, that we thought we were going to be, something real special this year. I'm talking about head to the national championship, but it just didn't play out that way. And it seems like we have a lot more work than we initially anticipated.
Exactly. Well, and then the neighbors game, they run up on us, 439 rushing yards.
Yeah.
And the defense, it didn't look like we had there was first of all, there was a ton of missed tackles, which is uncharacteristic of a Griz team. And then just the defensive scheme, those were when you started to first hear those kind of talks between the fans of, hey, is this 3-3-5 the best scheme that we're running in defense, right? Mm-hmm. It seems to be having teams rack up an enormous amount of rushing yards. And so I kind of wanted to kind of look into that because, really good rushing teams, right? The first really good rushing team that we played was Sac State, right? And that amazing Scattaboo or whatever his name was.
He's since transferred now. He's in the
portal. Right? He's in the portals. I don't think he's probably going to go to the Griz, but he probably will get a Power 5 look at. He'll probably go to Stanford with his coach, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, probably. I mean, I would see why not.
Yeah, why not, right?
Play for because he's a good coach. He's a really good coach.
Yep. Yeah. So they had 180 yards rushing yards against us. Sac State did. Weber State that next week racked up 192, and then we played Eastern. And Eastern, even with Eastern, I'm not saying they're a good rushing team. They had 102 on us, and I know that's not bad, but the team that Eastern had kind of quit. Mm-hmm. They quit in that game. They quit on that season. And then, MSU 439. And then you look at SEMO 142, which I think is kind of a deceiving number just because I think their running back kind of got hurt, and he was a beast of a running back. And then the final one, NDSU racked up 453 yards. Mm-hmm. So
I mean, you just see these really good teams.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, the way that we run our kind of defense, you know, they kind of exposes some of those big gaps.
Yep.
You know, and they might not always come, but eventually, if you keep pounding the rock and you have a good enough team like an NDSU,
Yep.
eventually they're going to take advantage. They're going to find those holes and they're going to take it to the house. I mean, how many 60-yard runs did they have on us?
4. They had 4. It was crazy. We mentioned that on the last podcast. They had 4 plays, 4 touchdowns, and 284 rushing yards on those 4 plays.
Exactly. And so you think about those, you eliminate those huge plays, those monstrosity of plays.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that do? I mean, we're right back in the game.
284, you know? Yeah, 284 minus 453 is still, you know, you're still getting almost 200. I mean, it's almost 200 yards.
Eliminate 4 touchdowns. You know, what does that potentially do? You know, that's 28 points knocked off right there. You know, we're a little bit we're sitting differently heading into that fourth quarter. You know, we might have a chance depending on the circumstance and how our offense is kind of. It just changes the whole momentum. It changes the dynamics. It changes the attitude. You know, when you're a game like that against you know, because they're going to win this week. They're going to be in the national championship, and they're going to see, you know, they're always going to have a run just because that's who NDSU is. But you see about those things, and you start to question. I said, okay, you know, the 3-3-5 can kick the shit out of some pretty mediocre teams. How does it handle against some really, really talented, strong, like run-heavy teams? You know, and I think we saw this year that it just didn't pan out the way that we wanted to. So you start to wonder, is this the most effective thing with how much talent we have on the field?
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of weird because I heard rumors of, you know, when Bobby first came back, they ran the 3-3-5 just because they are trying to get the talent up. They're trying to get the personnel up, and they wanted to run a scheme where it would be beneficial to what they had, right?
Yeah, like play to the players, like
play to the players, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
but
and
now
so then
when you think about a program and like a defense that we have,
yeah,
I mean, do we need the 3-3-5? Is, you know, who else runs the 3-3-5? How great is the defense? You know,
well, and there's not very many teams that run it.
Yeah,
now there were, but they're not running it now. And I honestly, like, my thoughts on it is like, can we do a base scheme where we're running either a 3-4 or 4? I kind of like more of a 4-3. You have another defensive lineman, to battle in the trenches, and then, you know, still have your 3-3-5 as another scheme that you can use on maybe 3rd and long, but it doesn't have to be your base scheme. You just throw it in there when you want to. I think it could work well.
I think it has its place for sure. That you know, a little bit underrated if you utilize it correctly, but having it as, like you said, your base, your bread and butter, what you kind of go to, I think in the long run, you know, people really start to exploit it. You know, I think it'd be, like you said, a great accessory, but I think there should be, you know, a couple of things that kind of change, especially with the type of talent. You know, if that was the truth that, hey, they play down to the players, that's totally fine. That makes a lot of sense. You got to play to what you got, you know, but now you see what we have, you know, it might warrant some change, you know, simply because we're too talented on the defensive side of the ball, you know, to kind of have some of those numbers, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you said it, right? The change word, right? Like going into this season, you know, the last 4 years, 5 years, we haven't picked up where, like, this year we didn't make it to the quarterfinals. So if you look at just like at the playoff route, we didn't make it to what we've had in the last 2 years. We've regressed. And I'm not saying that the players have regressed, because we have amazing players. The talent is there, but where we want to be, we've regressed somehow.
Yeah. And I think that's where people are kind of questioning, you know, and looking at the coaches a little bit more, you know, kind of closely, simply because on paper, from what everybody knows of these guys, there's a lot more talent than we've seen in a long time across the board. You know, were there gaps and were there questions? You know, 100% just like any other team. But overall, we were far more talented than any other players that we matched up against for the most part. And I think that's why, to see that, hey, you know what, we even didn't make it to this. Granted, we had to play NDSU, you know, but that's all based because of how the bracket kind of came out, you know, our regular season schedule, you know, not having a win against, you know, winning team type of thing, you know. But ultimately, you start to look at it and you're like, damn, we should be in a different position, you know. It's like we're living in a different universe right now. It should be a different thing going on right now. We should be playing, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
like I said a couple times already, just didn't fall that way. So I guess everybody and their mamas is just looking for an answer. You know, I think some people are looking at trying to place blame on somebody, point fingers, which is absolutely worthless. There's no point in that. But at the end of the day, there are questions that need to be answered in order to kind of provoke progress. And I guess that's what we're trying to figure out. Because I see a lot of people making good points, on Twitter, on Facebook, just trying to figure out how can we turn the ship around and make it right, because we're too good for that.
Well, and you look at it, some of the questions I had, and you let me know if you agree with these questions, and we can kind of go in. There's about 5 questions I have. So QBs, right? We haven't had a QB that was healthy throughout the whole season.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong, but I'm just trying to go off of memory. And I think it was Jordy Johnson in like 2008, 2009, right?
Yeah.
We have not had a quarterback developed, I think, since Andrew Select, and I could be probably wrong with that one as well. Sell. And so the second stint, Bobby hasn't had a quarterback that they have gone through, that they have recruited and kind of brought up. They've gone through the transfer portal, and I'm not saying the transfer portal is wrong. It's there for a reason, right? You got to get your guys. You got to plug holes somehow. And Coach Hauk said an amazing thing on his press conference. Is he's like, nowadays you're not trying to build a team. You're trying to build a team for the next year. You're trying to have your best team the next year, and that's totally accurate. A totally accurate piece of information. But the development of a quarterback is kind of looming. I feel that maybe they haven't, put their full trust in players that I think that they could be developing a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like almost an unwillingness to play to the strengths of players, where I think that they're saying, oh, well, we're recruiting these guys, but they have to fit the system, right? Well, if you're recruiting them for a certain reason, then I think you play to their strengths, right? And you see it in the NFL a lot. I think you probably saw it with the 49ers last week, where Garoppolo got hurt. They got Purdy in, and they changed things up, and they played to his strengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he did amazing for him. So when you have a QB like Lucas Johnson get hurt and you throw in a backup quarterback, you've got to play to their strengths. And I don't think we did that. And I don't think we're developing quarterbacks. And so that really, really, really is alarming to me, because are we developing players good enough? We have amazing talent, but are we developing that to a point where we don't have to go to the transfer portal every season and get a quarterback? Because the last 3 quarterbacks that Hauk has had, Snead, Humphreys, and Johnson, have all been from the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
too, I think Snead had newcomer of the year. I think he finished off his career, I think maybe third team or something like that, or maybe second. I don't think he was a first teamer, but you start to look at that and it's like, okay, like we haven't really had, a real superior quarterback at that position in a couple of years, and you start to, kind of wonder, and you start to compare at all these top programs. I mean, you think about NDSU traditionally, with this year kind of being a little bit of an exception. I mean, their quarterbacks are first-round draft picks. You know what I mean? Oh. You look at what's happening over there with the neighbors, and you think about, the type of player that he is. I mean, he's a sophomore, and he's absolutely killing it.
Dude.
So kind of look at that and, kind of compare some of these top programs and be like, okay, what do we need to do in order to get there? And again, I mean, there's 2 sides to it. I mean, you go to the transfer portal, you might get yourself, a 1-year stud that could potentially do it. Like you said, we're prepping for next year's team. We're not prepping for 3-4 years down the line like we used to, because they have access to the transfer portal. But at the same time, when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to, building from in-house, in-state kids, there's kids out there that we can potentially be utilizing and using. So it goes back down to recruiting. What kind of recruiting are we doing?
Exactly.
What are really what are the characteristics or the tangible things that we're looking for in these kids, and how they translate into the programs? Because obviously we haven't put these kids in the best position. If again, we've had a quarterback that consistently gets hurt, and there's other things that play into that. Obviously, play situations, how dirty other teams sometimes plays. Like there's so many things that you can't control. But at the end of the day, not one quarterback in the past 3-4 seasons, has been able to make it, because Cam had the potential to be something special, but I mean, he got hurt multiple times. Hard for to do that. Johnson had the potential, he was hurt. Snead had the potential, he was hurt. You know what I mean?
Well, that Weber State game, he was not himself, and he threw, and you just kind of go back into that as if he was healthy, right? And you start asking these questions of, well, if this, and you can't in sports, like, right? It doesn't do any good. So that was kind of just one of the development of players, and then the unwillingness to change, because if you look at recruitment, right? NIL, huge. This coaching staff and I agree to some part of it, old school, right? Tough-minded, and everybody is a part of this team. But
that's the thing. I don't see no aspects of that new school.
What's that? I don't see any of it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of alarming, because the athlete has changed, right? The athlete wants to be kind of catered to, not to and you don't have to cater to athletes a lot, but they want to be able to feel like they're appreciated. They want to be able to have these NIL deals. They want to be able to be publicized. We're not doing that well. And
I do think that I truly believe that those guys, they may think that, but ultimately I think here at this state, I don't think they really mind it. But I do think that it has to be, hey, as these players are changing their physiques in order to appear to the modern day football age, I also think that the coaches need to be able to do that. Take some of those old school mindset and those old school lessons. I 100% agree with. They made me a better player because of it. But kind of intertwining it with some of that new, the new day hybrid type of stuff, I think would play so much more better, because I see the buy-in from the team. I've been a part of the team that had that buy-in. I think if we had some of those, kind of more modern kind of is type of, packages, I do think that they'd be intertwined beautifully, and obviously put us in a really, really good position. I think that's kind of what we're missing.
Yeah. Well, and just the recruiting side of it, if you can't recruit players, right? If you can't recruit a quarterback to come here and develop him, I just feel like we're missing out on that, right? NDSU, if you look at who they recruit, the first thing that they recruit is their offensive line. They make those guys look like,
and you see that they're their second round, third round draft picks.
Yeah. Yep.
And we have the same caliber to be able to do something like that for a player, because of the environment, because of the the eyes, the eyeballs that we get on a program, and just the type of program that we are, as far as filling up the stadium, the TV time, all those sort of things. There should be guys from our teams that should be getting drafted, but they're not. Why?
Why? Is it development? Is it recruiting? Is it style? Is it what we're putting them into? And so this. Also, one of the questions is our skill players, right? One that just blows my mind is Cole Grossman, right? That guy is a guy that you should be going to all the time, that will blow by anybody. He was not used this season in the way that he should have been. Bergen, the last half of the season, I know he was injured, but you can't. And even Fonts is amazing. Those three guys, and even Malik Flowers to the first part of the season, you've got to use your playmakers. You've got to use your players and do whatever you can to get the ball in their hands, and not just play this old school, we're going to run it and down your throats. Because honestly, going outside of running it in some of those games, we didn't have a running game, right? Nick, the last two games against really horrible run teams, he had huge games, right? The last game against NDSU, Childs did amazing, right? And he kind of developed, and I'm really, really glad that the last couple of games he got to show what he could bring, because he did bring something that we hadn't seen.
Yeah, I
And
hope he stays.
Eli Gilman, holy cow, right? So those are kind of some things that I think that we have going on for us, but you've got to get your skill guys the ball, and we're not doing that at all. And so, going back to the quarterback, if we're recruiting a quarterback from a Power 5 conference like Indiana or Oklahoma or someone to come play for the Griz, and he says, okay, well, what are you going to play? Well, why would they want to come and play for Montana if we don't give our playmakers the ball?
No, it makes sense. Yeah.
So
I can see that. So, and that's kind of what I'm fearful for. The kind of effect that it's going to have on the recruiting cycle of things. Because I do also think that there's, in the older days, you didn't have access to social media the way that you have access to it now. So because of it, about your team. You can hop online and pull up Montana football and watch hundreds of videos on the teams that they've played in the past.
Yeah.
So because of that, as an actual educated person that has a degree based out of one of those Big Ten schools, that come over and look at the program and says, okay, there is a deep option on every route, but if I have, first option, second option, third option, and I have to check down to all those three, can I actually utilize that deep option the way that I want to, And so because of that, you start to kind of question. It says, what, things need to change as far as the offensive output, because we want those guys to get the ball. Everybody wants those guys to get the ball. They're fun to watch. They obviously do a really productive job. But we need to put it in an actual scheme that works with the quarterback, that works with the receivers, that works with the offensive line, because it's just, again, I think we're selling ourselves short, in certain types of ways. And then obviously you start to compare yourself against the SCSUs and the NDSUs, and you're like, okay, we thought we were there, but we're not there once again.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we kind of went into those questions. We kind of talked about the defensive scheme, where we think that kind of needs to be brought up. And then just the special teams, man, it was special teams and the lack of big plays really, really was kind of alarming. Turnovers, we turned over the ball, and I can't blame Lucas for this, but he did turn over the ball those last 3 games, and who knows how his injury played a part in that. Special teams.
Well, I think that was a big thing, man. I mean, because you saw that he wasn't able to throw off the back foot quite a bit, And so again, I mean, speed of recovery, but at the end of the day, it was just a little bit not like him to be able to throw those. But then again, we've solved some, kind of hiccups throughout the year. So who knows, so it's one of those things. Obviously, I hope he goes on to continue and pursue a professional career and get some opportunities to travel a little bit and go do his thing, But just like anything else, there's some work to be done on all levels, And I think those are the 2 biggest things, just the consistency in quarterback. Obviously, was one of them. A little bit of that youth in that, obviously, in that offensive front. We've, through the end of the year, obviously, we saw strides. Still not good enough, and they know that. They want to be better. So I'm looking forward to next year, because I think they're really going to be able to take it into full swing and provide an overall better experience, but also just a play calling. I think that's going to be a big thing too. And then on top of that, the defense, obviously talented all the way around, works pretty much about 80% of the time, but we need to have, better numbers as far as output, to be able to stop some of those teams, because again, we just have too much talent, just summarize it all.
Well, and if you look at the top teams, right? A lot of the top teams are just running teams, right?
Yeah.
And so if we want to beat those teams, we've got to change what we're doing. Change, like we've kind of been talking about change. We've talked about, updating the kind of how we're recruiting. The NIL, I think, kind of has to get brought up as well, that it needs to kind of be brought up to where NDSU and actually even the neighbors, I see a whole lot more football players from the neighbors on the TV than our guys, right? And then just also we brought up the development of skills of our players and our O-line. We've got some great guys, Angel, like you said, coming back on our offensive line, but we've got to develop some guys beyond that too.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so either bringing some guys in or developing some of those guys, also just,
Just to
making
have
sure
that
that
depth.
just to have that depth, because you just don't know. I know that we didn't miss too many guys this year, but they were playing through a lot of injuries.
Mm-hmm.
They had to, getting beat up like that. But one thing, that we kind of talked about but haven't, what are some of the changes that you would like to see, Angel? I know that I have some that I would kind of look like. I don't know, like, we're not saying that coaches should be fired, but there has to be some changes in some certain areas. What are some changes that you would do or would like to see for
I mean,
next
just
year?
kind of like we kind of talked about it. I think it would be kind of really beneficial to grow a quarterback from within. I do
Yep.
think that obviously this upcoming year, just putting a little bit more emphasis on the offensive line, because obviously, they're pretty good, but they need to get to that upper echelon of being a great kind of unit. I think the play calling needs to change a little bit too on both the offensive and defensive, kind of schematics. I do think if we start to adjust and kind of understand that, hey, there's young minds in the football world, even at the professional level right now, for a reason. Football is changing. You either got to hop on the wagon or get left behind. Obviously, we're in a program that, kind of want that dominance. I think we're a long way from it, but I do think that, we always have a chance to, and any year could be our year. It really, really could. But I do think that we need to be progressive with the game of football in general. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I think we need to get some new, not that, I appreciate the coaching staff. The coaching staff that we have works extremely hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, working extremely hard, sometimes you can work harder, but it doesn't give you the results that you want. I
Yeah.
think you've got to work sometimes you have to work smarter.
Uh-huh.
And so, I think updating our offensive scheme and our defensive scheme would help. If that's, moving some off, going to a different offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, I think we need to look at, right? We've had the same staff for what, 5-6 years, and that's kind of unheard of. And I think some of those guys are, not to be age biased, but they're getting up in age. And I think that we kind of need to get some new blood and some younger guys in there that will kind of invigorate and kind of change some of the things that we've been doing, because they're just not working. The offense is predictable sometimes. The offense is not getting the ball to our skilled players. The defensive side is getting eaten up by really good running teams. And so we've got some things to look at. I don't think that if you look at the coaches, I do think that, maybe one or two may retire this year. I think that going into it, I think they kind of had this like, hey, let's make one last run. They saw what they had and kind of, hey, let's try to get a national championship. I do think that there might be changes, at least one change coming in this next year. And who knows? Who knows? There might be more than that. I do think that they're probably going to go to the transfer portal for a quarterback, just because I think that what we lack in quarterback in experience, right? So I think,
Yeah, again, you want to see it from within, but ultimately that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna look for that guy to see how to mesh in the program, and it's always a little bit of a scary thing. But I'm kind of really hopeful for Britt. You know what I mean? If I'm being honest with you, obviously we saw that last game that he has a lot of work to be done. But I think with the proper coaches, with the proper training, that kid could be something fun to watch. But it's all going to depend on how they kind of go about him.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that he shows some grit, man. And I love his attitude. He's not scared of anything. He's a gunslinger. And I think that if they kind of develop him into a way that will be good for the program, I think he could be a really good quarterback. And so we've got a lot of good pieces. I think we lose a lot. I think Eli Alford is a big loss this year in the offensive or the defensive line.
Front, yeah.
Yeah.
We still got Gubby.
Governor's still there. And so I'm kind of, it's kind of weird because you look at their, Governor's going to be a senior next year, right? Mm-hmm. But he's been there for what, 6 years probably? Mm-hmm. So it's like it's so different now just because of the COVID year and all that stuff, and players with red shirt, here and there, or red or gray shirt or whatever. It'll be really interesting to see if players stay around and go for their graduate studies and stay around, or if they say, hey, I've got my degree, I've played, I'm gonna go on to the next aspect of life, which there have been players to do, and you can't fault them with that. So it'll be really interesting to see if that happens. And also just the transfer portal. Are we going to see some guys leave? I don't think that we're not going to. I think that's kind of just the new world that we live in, that we're going to lose some. I wouldn't think that we lose a lot, but I do think we're going to lose some. And then they'll probably go to the transfer portal to get that back as well. So,
yeah, no, man. I mean, the transfer portal I think they're going to really try to, I don't know, man. I do think that a couple changes will be made on that coaching staff. As far as what type of changes, I don't necessarily know. Even if it's a coach going to a little bit more of an analyst position, vice versa, kind of moving some things around, bringing in some. I really hope they bring some younger minds, some really talented young minds that see if they can kind of change a couple of things, maybe inspire certain type of things within the program. But ultimately, I do think that we're going to be heading into the transfer portal just to try to see if we can get some more experience in a couple different places, because we're losing some really, really, really talented guys, or some guys that have played a really, really huge pivotal role within defense, the offense. And so because of that, I think we're going to be attacking that pretty hard. But it's going to be really hard to kind of, emulate those same guys from this past year. That's one thing that I really kind of wanted to hound on, the things that they've done for the university, the way that they put us in positions, to really have national spotlight and give us a fighting chance, and how hard they work, and the type of games that they played, and how they always had some type of grit and swagger to them, man. I mean, all I can do is, just salute you, man, and give you nothing but love and respect, man, because, I've been in that chair, I've been in that position. So as you guys take that next, kind of leap of faith into the world, just know that you got brothers behind you that are always going to support you. The past, present, and future Griz Warriors. If you know.
Exactly.
And so because of that, it was fun to watch. Even though it didn't turn out the way that we wanted it to. I'm just really grateful that I had an opportunity to see some greatness kind of in front of me.
Well, and in this senior class, man, we're losing a lot. Like a lot of leadership, a lot of guys that could play, a lot of guys that worked extremely hard to get to where they were. Patrick O'Connell just blows my mind, being a walk-on from a baseball scholarship to be where he's at. Justin Ford is a rare talent. You look at Marcus Wellnow. If you go down the line, right? Alfred, that doesn't really get a lot of the credit, but he plays his part well and gets a lot of the blows. Mitch, right? I think he gets overlooked as well. Flowers becoming the all-time return leader for the Big Sky, and also nationally tying that record. And then Robbie Houck, getting the tackles record, however you want to put it. There may be fans that disagree with him or whatever, but he brought that attitude. He brought that.
He did, yeah.
You can't halt him for being a 5'8", 5'9", and not wanting to back down from anybody. And so I kind of think that kind of led that defense to kind of have that attitude. And so no matter what, I think that you thank these guys for what they've done, because it was a great 4 years for them, and a lot of them played more than 4 years. But
yeah. So would have loved to see it on a different note, man. Would have loved to see it on a different note.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. And it's sad to see it go, and on to the next year, man. So we wish them the best in whatever they do. And so, you ready for some fan questions, man?
Yeah, let's answer them. Let's do it.
All right. So this first one is from Lone Griz. What do we need to do to get back on top of the conference? Do we need new coordinators, schemes, recruiting, approach? I'm a Griz fan through and through, but it sure looks like we're behind some teams as far as being creative on offense and our recruiting focus.
I think for recruiting is kind of second. I do think that they were bringing some really, really good guys. Obviously, Exhibit A. We've seen the talented teams that we've had, but I do
Yeah.
think that, if I'm kind of top of mind, I do think that, a change in the offense, defense, just get schematics. I think if we change those things, it'll put us in a lot better position, especially with teams nowadays. You see some stuff that's happening around the Big Sky, and you're like, man, if we implemented some of those tactics to our kind of offensive mindset, defensive mindset, I think it'd be really tough for people to keep up with us.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that side. I think, bringing in some new blood, some younger guys, I think that will kind of, and I don't know, I'm not in the coach's room, guys, but some guys that aren't his friend, that aren't
Mhm.
Coach Haug's friends, that will kind of push him. I don't know how much push he's getting in that coach's arena.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but when you're doing a company, when you're doing anything where you are trying to get better each and every day, you want someone pushing you, right? You want
Hmm.
somebody pushing you to make sure that you're doing the best that you can. I just hope that we have those guys that are behind him, that are pushing the coaching staff, that are pushing the head coach to do what's best for the program. So I think, having a different OC, a different defensive coordinator. I think also maybe even looking at glossening up the offensive line. I think coaching staff. I think we've seen some gain this year, but is it enough? Right? Is
Yeah.
it enough to stay with? Because beyond that point, we had Hunter McGinnis be on the all conference team, but before then we hadn't had one in for how long, right? And
Hmm.
so do we continue on and see where this goes, or do we improve that? I think that we just kind of have to have all three of those kind of coaching areas kind of have the spotlight on them and kind of look at those. With recruiting, I think that we do a whole lot of in state recruiting. We bring in a lot of guys in state, and I think right now it's kind of hard to these last 2 years with COVID and everything. Our numbers have been so high, right? Our freshman and sophomore grades, the players that are in those areas are very, very high, right? We don't have very many seniors or juniors. Those are the classes that have a lot of players in, and so I think they're kind of stringent on how many players they can offer.
Hmm.
So going out, and I think I don't know how well we are recruiting it in some of these hotbeds that I think we could take more advantage of, like Sac State, right? Sac State gets a lot of their guys from California, right? We're we're not California, right? Montana does not have the population and it does not have the football capabilities to have that quality of a recruit.
Yeah.
But how far, Missoula isn't very far away from Spokane or Seattle. And I don't think, we've gotten some guys, we've gotten, from Vancouver and stuff like that. But I think that area over there is something that we could probably take more advantage of. And I think that for our recruiting, I think it needs to be more focused on getting these guys that can play right away on the offensive line and the defensive line. Kind of going away from developing and getting these guys that we can get into that need a little development, but not like full development. And I think that's what we've been doing with the offensive line, is getting these guys that need a lot of development and kind of missing on these guys that may be ready. And I've been maybe totally wrong. But if you look at back in the early 2000s, we got great players from the state of Montana. Well, that, again, like we said, that's 10 years ago, right? The focus of Montana football, the numbers of high quality recruits in that area, especially the offensive line, are not coming out of the state, right? You got a lot of more pro style throwing teams in the state of Montana. So you're getting a lot of slot receivers and stuff like that are coming out. Then offensive linemen. And so I think that we just need to have more of a focus on that, the bigs, the trenches. And I think that will lead us into the promised land or beating these other teams, because that's where it comes down to.
Yep.
And so great question. I think that if we start with recruiting there, we change some things up with our schemes, I think we'll be there.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I agree.
Another one that we had 2 more, so we'll go if I can find it here. Dustin Helton asks us, is it time for fresh blood at the head coach level and send Houck out? I don't think that 1 year you send a coach out. I think that you have to let them be able to make some changes, right? It wasn't a great year that we had. It wasn't living up to the expectations that we had, but you've got to make sure that you give a chance for him to try to correct it, right?
Yeah, I think like that, like you just said, giving him an opportunity kind of to correct it a little bit, see what he can potentially do with it, and how open-minded he is to it. Simply because, as far as for a player, I thought he was 100% good for me. As far as the way that I view the game, the way that I wanted to pursue the day-to-day basis, and even after playing, kind of mentality into the just life. I think because of that, he had such a profound positive influence in my life. I would love him to be the guy that takes us to the promised land, but at the same time, I do think that, just like anything else, need a couple changes to be made in order to kind of get there. So I don't think he's necessarily out the door. I think this is where he wants to be. And then we look at the other side of the coin. We run the risk of being, a below 500 team for how long? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. With coaches beforehand that just couldn't get it done, that didn't even have a chance to make it to the playoffs. Now we're fighting for playoffs. Is it really a step back up, or I guess you never really know? But I don't think he's ready to leave. I don't want to see him leave, and I'd love to see him kind of make some of those changes to put us in a good position.
Yeah, and I think that you give him a year or 2 to kind of see what he can do to fix the things that we need to fix. And if it still is going out, then I think that that's the case where the athletic director kind of then reevaluates that. I think that there's some things that Coach Houck does that are really well. I think that there's some things that kind of need to change as well. And we've talked about those. Recruiting needs to, and then also just winning the state, right? Winning the state in recruiting, winning the state in how our program is being looked at. And then I'm looking at as just like, it's hard to be a part of the media, right? So the media is going to do their job. And I know that Coach Houck does not like the media. He doesn't like to do that part of that aspect of that job, but it is a part of the job, right? And it is how you get yourself
out. And it's a growing thing too,
Yeah. And I think that has to just, he's got to be a little bit more lenient with that, because that'll come out and hit you too. And that'll hurt you in the recruiting process as well. So I think we just need a little bit of fresh air in some of the things that we're doing.
100%.
Last question. Mike wants to know if we were going to give grades on coaches and stuff like that, what would we give them? I know, Angel, I know that you don't feel, and that's fine. If you wanted to give grades, that's totally fine. I will give grades. And I just want to
give it grades. I'll since I know a lot of these guys, I'll keep it to myself. I'll have a conversation with them one-on-one.
There you go.
Go ahead, Adam.
So I know that the coaches are, and I can imagine that they spend a lot of time away from their families, right? I can imagine what they go through. So I wanted to preface it with that, right? Overall, this year was not where we want to be, right? So
the year,
yeah. So I would say over the year, I think overall C.
I was going to say the same thing, in the C range.
The C range. I think if you look overall, that's a C. I think different areas in this season, you could probably give different,
argue for some, yeah.
The NDSU game our players, they went out and battled, and it didn't matter what was happening. They battled until the last straw, right? The neighbor game bothers the crap out of me because I don't think that we really tried to change, and that unwillingness to change and do something different kind of swung its head. And so that game, if you were just individual game, that would be a very low grade because we just did not change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think fans are so tired of it is that we're playing schemes that aren't working, and they're tired of it, and they want to see Griz Nation back on top. So, I wouldn't give anyone an F. I think that we're not failing. We're still making the playoffs. We're one of the top 10 teams, no matter what people say. I think that if you look at that, who William and Mary, there's no way in the world that team should have got a number 8 seed or whatever seed they were. The Griz were way better than that team. And so it's kind of disheartening. I'm not going to give them an F. I'll give them a C, maybe D plus area on, certain games where we didn't do quite as well. But there's room for improvement, man. And we've got a lot of things that I thought we were closer than we were, that now I'm kind of looking back at it and saying, are we closer to what we thought we were at, or are we farther away?
Mm-hmm. We're probably farther right now.
Yeah. And so the things that we're losing, I think, our defense is going to take a step back. I think we've got some good guys there that will kind of step up. I think offensively wise, we've got some good guys too, but we're still going to be asking that quarterback controversy question next year, where who's going to start, right? And it'll be interesting to see. Everybody's going to be wanting to know the transfer portal, who's coming in the transfer portal, who's making moves on the coaching staff. And so I think that's going to be the looming kind of questions on what happens in the off season and coming into the new year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, I think if we're just grading the season, and not coaches specifically, I do think that it falls into the C category. I think offensively, I think it was probably C category 2. I do think defensively, B range at the end of the season. Arguably some games it was A plus 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 plus. You know what I mean? But I'm just kind of going off of the strength of schedule. I'm kind of going off of the superior teams that we played. How did we kind of fare up against those really kind of talented teams?
Yeah.
And, I would probably say it's in the beat range. Just simply because we had too many good performances throughout the course of the year. I think on offense, definitely need to be, just taking advantage of some of those, different packages. It just we haven't been able to see that. So because of that, I think the performance wasn't necessarily player based. I think it was more play calling based. So because of that, could it have been maybe a B or an A? 100% it probably could have, but I think realistically from what we actually produced, C, maybe even D, kind of depending.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That we just had some hiccups in the road. I think that, it'll be interesting to see what happens in this next year of what kind of growth and what kind of steps we make in the new year. So, any last words, man? Any last things that you want to say that,
just another year down, brother. Just another year down. I mean,
another year.
The strides that we made, the lessons that we learned. And so we're just grateful that you guys are a part about it. Be sure to check us out at FCN's Fans Nation on YouTube. So you can actually see the live stream. And we're kind of on a world incorporated just with FCS football. So there's a lot of other teams on there as well that you guys can check out. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get you guys' listening needs. And so we'll be there around. And so, yeah, we just want to say thank you for rocking with us, man. And that's kind of all that I really have to say on the year.
Yeah, exactly. And, you guys can get a hold of us on Twitter and also Instagram at Fight on Montana as well. And hit us up there. But yeah, thanks for listening. We appreciate you guys on these live podcasts going back and forth with us and kind of sharing and doing questions. We hope for you to listen tell your friends about us. We want
Yep.
to grow this podcast into something that you guys are proud of, that you guys want to tell your friends with. And so tell your friends about us. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe wherever you guys get our podcasts. And go Griz.
Fight on, baby.